the Spiritist Talk series, promoted by the United States Spiritist Federation, occurring every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. I am very happy to host this talk by Aluizio Porcaro Rausch, who will be leading our live with the theme Sublimation, Love, Cause and Effect, and Reincarnation. I would like to take a brief moment for some announcements. If you couldn't participate either in person or virtually at the 16th U.S. Spiritist Symposium in Houston, Texas, and also missed the celebration of the USSF 25th anniversary, there is still time for you to watch the entire event on the United States Spiritist Federation YouTube channel. You will find talks, roundtables, and the very special youth panel. Also, if you are interested in learning more about Spiritism, you can watch the complete course, Initiation into Spiritism, at your own pace with lessons and QA sessions, which is also on our YouTube channel. Stay tuned for future announcements on a follow-up course for next year. More details coming soon. And one more announcement before we move on to the presentation. On the screen, please note there is a QR code. If you want to help the USSF produce more publications and promote Spiritism to everyone, scan the QR code on screen for your donation. Now, back to Aluizio Porcaro Rausch. It is so good to have you with us today. Together with everyone who is watching this live broadcast now, I want to give you a very warm welcome. It is so good to have you here to discuss sublimation, love, cause and effect, and reincarnation. I am sure you're as eager as I am to hear from Aluizio. But before he starts to enlighten us in the next hour, please allow me to formally introduce him. Aluizio is a tax attorney who has a JD and master degree in law from UFMG and a LL.M degree in international taxation from NYU. He is with the Spiritist group of New York and is also a worker with Centro, Espírita, Manoel, Felipe, Santiago in Belo Horizonte, where he participates in mediumistic meetings and other activities. Please take this opportunity to send your questions during the presentation using the chat window. Aluizio has reserved time to address your comments and questions once he concludes his presentation. And so I introduce to you Aluizio.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Bradley. Thank you very much for the kind introduction, for the kind words. I would like to also thank the United States Spiritist Federation for this renewed opportunity to talk about this topic that I love so much, that it's so dear to my heart. And let's get to it. Sublimation, love, cause and effect in reincarnation, right? This topic is so important to me because it's what we're going to talk about today is this book, right? Which is called Sublimation, was written by the medium Yvonne Amaral Pereira and the spirits Leo Tolstoy and Charles through mediumship, right? Written mediumship. I had the opportunity to translate this book for FEB, Federação Espírita Brasileira, and my dear friend Jussara Korngold did the proofreading, so my regards to her as well. Okay, so just a few words from the book itself that I would like to read as an introduction, right, to the subject. They reunite today and separate tomorrow in the course of reincarnations, only to feel awful because of the other's absence. They once again reunite to idolize each other even more in an ever-growing impulse of love, which tends to sublimate itself in the spiral of evolution. This is from chapter 5 of this book, which is called evolution. Um, Before getting to the chapters themselves, to the short stories, just a little idea about this book. I think that we are very fortunate to live in the days in the era that we live, because we have this tool, this amazing tool of interpreting life, spirituality, and ourselves, that we call Spiritism. And in Spiritism, I tend to think, as we are like a later offshoot of Christianity, we are Christians, of course, deeply, but we are also specialists, right? That we tend to specialize in certain phenomena, right? That we do that through mediumship. And through this dual mediumship, and based on the teachings of Christianity, of Christ, we are able to look at certain aspects of our current lives and even trace back to past ones, right? In this book, Sublimation, we deal deeply with that phenomenon, with that dynamic. We, as beings who love, who are able to do many great things because of love, we are also in a track of learning how to love in a better way, in a more respectful way, in a more disciplined way, in a more, or actually less harmful way to ourselves and to others. So the focus here of Yvonne Amaral Pereira and the spirits that bring to us this text is to really show how love, as this great energy aspect of our lives, grows and develops throughout reincarnations, to the point that we reach higher levels of being, of understanding the world around us, understanding ourselves uh, through this love. Maybe in the early stages, and the book actually follows this dynamic of first stories, they show a love that is more like a raw stone, and then it gets worked on and becomes more full of light, right? Maybe in the early stages, love can be a little selfish, love can be extremely self-destructive, and not leading to best circumstances in life. But as we progress, and unfortunately, a lot through pain, we do teach ourselves how to love better. So this book is deeply about this love. That's why the subtitle, Love, Cause and Effect, and Reincarnation. Moving forward, this is just a quick information about this translation, right? It was the book itself was published by Fabi in 1974. Again, Yvonne do Amaral Pereira was the medium, the spirits Leo Tolstoy and Charles, right? The translation itself was published last year, March 21, so it's not anymore out of the fresh out of the oven, but it's a pretty recent translation. If you haven't read it yet, I really strongly recommend reading. You can find the book in all those platforms. The author is a little bit about Dona Ivone. She was born in Rio in 1900, and she died also in Rio, but in the capital, right? In 1984. Leo Tolstoy, as you all know, the Russian writer, he was born in 1828 in Russia, right? And died in 1910. The last person here in the picture is Charles. We don't know a lot about him. We have information about him from references in Dona Ivonne's books. She has many of them, and this character comes and goes, different stories, different texts. but we don't really know how he looked like or even past reincarnations. But yeah, those are the three people here involved in this great book. Dona Ivone has published a lot during her life. Maybe you are not so familiar with her. She was a great medium here in Brazil. We tend to focus more on Chico, Divaldo, and but you definitely would not lose your time if you looked a little bit more about her, looked up a little bit more about her, and try to read some of her books. Right? I guess if there is one book that people definitely know about is Memórias de um Suicida or Memoirs of a Suicide. The first one here to the left, top left. It's a great book. It's been translated for many years already, and also some others have been translated. Some are on the works, but it's definitely a good choice of reading. Right? Six stories, one core theme. This book, it's not a novel that follows one character from the beginning to the end, but it's composed of six different short stories. Right? The first one is called Obsession. Second one, Immortal Love. The third, Sublime Destinies. The fourth is Kara Alexeyevna. And these the four first stories, they were written by Leo Tolstoy as a spirit, right? The last two, Evolution and Nina, they were written by Charles, right? All of those six were psychographed by Don Ivone and put together in a collection because they have actually one core theme, which is this idea that love, right, uh, can be a little bit rough in the beginning, a little bit, as I said, self-destructive, maybe very selfish, but through pain and experience, it develops, right? So that's why I at least understand they were put together in this collection. Uh, One curiosity about the two last ones is that they are actually more or less autobiographies. I wouldn't say autobiographies because they have some changes, but they do depict past lives of Don Ivone herself. We will get more into that later, but that's an extremely interesting characteristic about those two because in other books, she then brings or talks about stories that relate to those chapters, and then you can see the trajectory of this spirit throughout the ages. And for me personally, I think this in-person experience of spiritism is extremely enlightening because when we read the Spirit's book, right, when we read the Medium's book, the Gospel According to Spiritism, other books by Allan Kardec, we get a very deep knowledge of Spiritism, maybe the mechanics, right, what it is all about. But it is, at least for me, it's hard sometimes to get those teachings and put in our lives, to bring it to our daily decisions, our daily experiences. And what I tend to think is that Don Ivone in this book, she did a great job of translating into stories from her own experience, from other spirits' experience, this teaching, this application, let's put it like that, application of spiritism, right? So, core theme, love, cause and effect, and reincarnation. A little bit Leo Tolstoy. Why was he so involved in this book? As you may know, a certain book by Leo Tolstoy talks about young love and how someone actually committed suicide as a gesture of love. Right? We were back then in the Victorian age, like for the more Anglo-Saxon centered cultures. And uh, in general, we were living this romantic age of literature and of music, of painting. And that at the time, this gesture of suicide was perceived, at least through this book, as a great show of love, the ultimate sacrifice someone could do for love. And in the introduction of the preface of this book, Leo Tolstoy tells what were the consequences of having written a book like that when he was later disincarnate. So I just took some excerpts from the book itself that I would like to read and share with all of you. So, before abandoning to earth my carnal spoils, I promised God and myself that I would write something to counter suicide. Several times I was grieved by the news that one, then another, and again another woman, carried away by the passion of human love, had copied the gesture of a certain famous hero from one of my romances. If the offenders were inspired by the stories told by me, I felt guilty for being cause of that misfortune, and even came to regret the inspiration that led me. My mind, conceiving literary suicides that molded other suicides, involved me in this tormented waveland. I honestly think that in these brief words, Leo Tolstoy gives us a extremely important lecture about the potential or the potentialities, the abilities of the spirit, how we mold reality with our minds, with our thoughts. And again, it is someone who did not commit suicide himself, right? But through this amazing ability of creating art, he inspired other people to do it. And this guilt that he felt led him to promise or to have the intention of trying to counter that. And again, in the last one, my mind, conceiving literary suicides that molded other suicides, involved me in this tormented waveland. Uh, Referring once again to Memoirs of a Suicide, we have a very well explained description of the challenges people who commit this act face after death, according to Spiritism. And here we have someone who did not commit it, but was anyway involved in the wavelengths because of the power of his mind, right? So he was experiencing the effect of suicides in others because he was connected to them. And that brought him to try to do something about it. Okay. So now we get to the first chapter. It's called Obsession. This chapter it talks about I will not try to give a lot of spoilers, right? About because of the plot itself, but it's about a young lady who is in an asylum, and she is writing letters to a friend reporting what happened to her, why she was there, and what she was experiencing in the asylum itself, and what she was or had experienced through her mediumship. She before we get into the specifics of the story, she was basically betrothed, and uh, her betrothed, the man she was going to marry, died, right? And she, through her mediumship, started to experience his difficulty in moving on, and she herself was driven a little bit insane because of this connection. She herself extremely attached materially, and showing this passion or this manifestation of love in a more maybe selfish and not elevated way, I guess, right? So this is a also except from the short story, in which she was describing to her friend through letter, right? One of the mediumistic sights or visions that she had about this young man who had just passed. That's her description. There he was, half body outside the grave, not able to stand up and free himself from the pile of dirt and stones that held him. His eyes were frenzied, haggard, his mouth open as if struggling to inhale air without being able to, his hands clenched, grabbing the edge of the grave, and his face was so white and squalid that it actually looked like the face of a ghost. So she here is describing one of the first visions that she had of this boyfriend, this betrothed, after he died, and he was as a ghost or as a spirit, trying to get him rid from the grave, but he was actually stuck, right? He was as a spirit stuck on the ground and not understanding what's happening, asking for help, and maybe still obsessed by the delusion that he was still alive. And through his unbalance, his mental and spiritual unbalance, he was also unbalancing her. That's the one of the aspects of the phenomenon that we call obsession. And please do not think that it was a one way a one way road, right? She herself is also deeply in love and still young and not very well educated in certain aspects of spiritual life. She was also sending him, right, vibrations that kept him attached to the life that he had before. So it was a it was like a mutual relationship there of attachment that led to this horrible description here, this difficulty of someone moving forward, right? This is just a reference to the picture. I thought it was a good one. Okay, so moving forward to the second chapter. It's called Immoral Love, right? Here we have a story of a young man. It's also in the mid 1900s, right? And sorry, 19th century, 1800s. It's pretty much was the time when Allan Kardec was around, when Spiritism was developing, the seances were happening. So this young man, he was learning about Spiritism. He was deeply interested in it, and he tries to publish a story that he got from a friend in Brazil, an European lady who had moved to Brazil. She was a medium, and she was describing her life and the relationship with her spiritual guide, right? And all the hardships that she had to go through in order to meet the goals of her present life, back then, right? And this young man keeps going to different meetings, to talking to some spiritist leaders at the time. Some are fictional, but he then threw the plot. And honestly, this one, this short story here, Immortal Love, is one of the uh, plot shifting, that for me are the most amazing. By the end of the book, you really, when you finish this story, this short story, you really you are in awe, because you never expect the ending, to be honest. And as he was trying to publish the story and talk about spiritism and to get people's attention to it, he then learns his own role in a previous life of this young lady. right? It's just it, really amazing, this story, this short story, and a little excerpt from it again. You should rather consult your own heart, your own intuitions. Philip Filipovich, that's the name of the character, and you will find him. It was not in vain, my poor friend, that you were chosen. You were the chosen one by law of reparation to write this singular theme to the greater public. So this short story has the additional teaching of showing us that many things that happen in our lives, they are not coincidences, right? uh, when we may do things through for passion and uh, jobs, careers, but many times, or pretty much most of the time, we follow certain directions because we are in a way repairing things that we did before, maybe not in the best fashion, or we are developing new skills, but in order to reach better status of life that maybe in previous lives we were not able to. So yeah, yeah, again, an amazing short story. And the picture, the choice of the picture here is because in the book, in this short story specifically, the characters, they talk about the lilac tree a lot, and how the perfume and the colors, they inspire the mediumship of certain mediums those situations. So that's why I chose the picture here. Okay, Sublime Destinies. But before I get to that, just one observation about the short stories that Don Yvonne put in the book. She always starts each short story with a reference to either the Spirit's book or the Gospel according to Spiritism, and to the Medium's book. For those who are more familiar with her works in Brazil and in Spiritism, for Fabi, she was a very, very disciplined medium, in the sense that she really followed the teachings of Allan Kardec, right? And there are some publications by her in which people wrote to her asking questions about spiritism, certain aspects, like a Q&A letter exchange, and she would write them. It's also a great reference. I don't know if it's translated. I don't think it is, but in those responses, she would always go to Allan Kardec and provide the reference from the mechanics. Let's put it like that, from Spiritism, and then explain it in more words, right? And specifically directly to that person's question. So she does it in all of these books here. So the idea is she starts citing Allan Kardec, and then she brings a short story that actually connects to that teaching and explains uh, in a literary way um, those aspects of Spiritism. In Sublime Destinies, we have a Cossack. It's the story about uh, a Russian person, right? This man, he was from this region in Russia. He was like a horseman, and he was involved in the army. It's the imperial age of Russia, and he fell in love, or it was both ways, of course. He fell in love with a young, uh, soon to be princess of Russia, and their love was not well seen by their families, because he was from more humbler background, from a more simple uh, peasant, let's say, background, and she was a more high level elite in the time. So her love was not allowed by society, and this was a very difficult choice for both of them, because they had to give up their chances of loving each other in this life, and well, and all the consequences that came from it. The beginning, it was not easy to give up, right? So, just a brief description of this character in the story. He looked like he was 60 years old and dressed himself oddly, wearing very large pants made of crude cloth, black, tucked inside a pair of boots that reached the middle of his shanks, and a tunic also oddly large and equally black, adjusted on the waist by a belt from the same quality, which he fastened with sloppiness, destitute from any vanity. Over the head, he wore some sort of a cap made of the same black textile, and more accurately, a kerchief tied as a cap or a turban. He had long hair and a beard that reached his chest, both grizzled. This is him later in life, and he had more or less found his way, right? But he lived more like it lived more like a secluded life, more contemplative life, life of meditation, and it's also a very interesting story. I definitely encourage you guys to read it. Then we move to the fourth. This is the last short story that Leo Tolstoy wrote in this book. It's called Carla Alexievna, and it's a story about a young woman. Again, in this plot that she was going to get married, but this time it was not the betrothed or the future husband that had an accident, but herself. She was from the elite in Russia, and she fell from a horse a few days before her marriage, and she became um, her body was uh, was really harmed in this way, in such a way that she decided, not without struggling a lot and with a lot of suffering, that she did not want to get married, right, with this person. She was deeply in love. Do not mistake her decision for lack of love. She was deeply in love, but she decided that it would not be a happy relationship, even though this husband or the future husband was extremely caring and wanted to conclude the marriage. She decided not to because she thought that she would become a burden to her husband, and very soon later he would regret the choice, and whatever love they had would be simply destroyed by that situation. So I'm not giving spoilers here because that's the beginning of the story, and then we see her progressing to her older age and the choices she made with her limitations and her afflictions, and how she became an inspiration, right, for the younger generation about showing love in a way that maybe people wouldn't see it as love or would not accept it as love because uh, maybe sometimes we are moved by more selfish reasons. And in this story, the Lady of Kazan, it's one of the depictions of Our Lady Mary. Is very strongly done. It's beautifully depicted here, and this relationship of the sacrifices of this young lady to the sacrifices of the historical Mary, right? As a woman, it's also very beautifully done. The connections from a literary standpoint. I'm going to read again. Cold sunbeams came in through a close-by window, which stained glasses displaying the multicolored silhouette of the Lady of Kazan, filtered suggestive reflexes that framed the Carla's singular figure. This, imagine yourself, this older lady, her body affected by this accident, but her spirit reflecting so much light, uh, like it was from the projection of a stained glass from behind her. This amazing description here. The fifth book is already the first book by Charles. Right now, just to be clear here, we're not talking anymore about the short stories written by Leo Tolstoy in Sublimation. We're talking about now Charles, right? And in Evolution, this character is I wouldn't say ancient, but it's pre-Roman, pre-Christian Roman time. And he was a ruthless ruler in Persia back then, one of the chieftains or small kingdoms in the region. And he was a very austere, a very aggressive, violent ruler. And his government, his ruling was through pretty much oppression and violence. And this young prince, right, having not known love in his life, he meets a young Greek woman, and he falls in love deeply for this woman. But she herself, she was not also spiritually developed, so their love evolves in a way of passion, obsession, and it does not end well, right? And this person then later reincarnates, and as we see, this is the earliest description of Charles on past lives. And the Greek lady, this Greek woman, is actually Dona Yvonne herself in also a past life. If I understand it correctly, it was their first encounter in previous lives, and their love developed in a way that throughout the ages, they kept meeting again and again and again in this back and forth uh, dynamic that allowed not only the two of them but other people in their constellation of spirituality to also evolve, right? um, Also an excerpt from the short story here. 19 centuries of suffering, work, and accomplishments. Again, 19 centuries. We're talking about almost, right, 2,000 years of suffering, work, and accomplishment that transformed him, this Persian prince. He had died, suffered, fought, worked, loved, served, conquered himself, and renovated himself for God. He had progressed. He had come to know the hardship of progress through all the social classes. He had educated himself. He had completed himself. This short story is, in a way, it summarizes what the book Sublimation tries to teach or tries to convey. Uh, it is pretty much impossible for any of us to reach higher levels of spirituality in one life, right? Life is too short, right? To learn all the many things we need to learn, to discipline ourselves, to even experience the consequences of our own bad decisions. So this person, and we have a glimpse in the short story about the different lives that he led later, and all the different connections that the two made, the couple made, sometimes as husband and wife, sometimes as just friends, and how that relationship was really uh, becoming more polished, more enlightened. So it's really chapter 5 is really a good summary, a good summary of sublimation. What actually sublimation in the spiritual sense means. Last one. This is one of my favorites. It's also one of the longest chapters. It's called Nina. Uh, this story is about, again, Dona Yvonne herself, but way later. It was in the 19th century Spain, and also Charles was there, but not anymore as a lover. And she was a gypsy woman, right? She was a dancer, um, back then, and Charles was a young doctor who cared a lot about people's needs. He was a very progressive person back then, and he was really involved in philanthropy and good works. And he meets his person, this Nina, who was sick. She has tuberculosis, and he feels the connection right away, but not in a love physical sense of the word, but in a more like, I know this person is spiritually, and she is in trouble. I have the means to help. I can help. And we go through the story. It's a very charming story. It's a very, I guess it's more, uh, as it's more recent in chronological sense. It's easier for us to understand the context and the social difficulties that the characters go through, and it's definitely one of the most recent reincarnations of Dona Ivone. Later, she reincarnates in Portugal, um, and then in Brazil. So it's very recent for her spiritual progression, and honestly, very well written and very inspiring. But not only that, but it's a very it's a fluid story that really gets your attention and makes you want to read and read. Right? Again, I will read an excerpt from it. A chill of unusual. That's when they saw each other. Right? Uh, a chill of unusual emotion run along the sensitive fibers of the young nobleman, followed by inexplicable distress and discomfort. He displayed a gesture of surprise, which was not unnoticed by Constantia. A burdensome Constantia was his fiancée at the time. A burdensome sensation supervened, and it was as if he asked himself, in the intimacy of his soul, touched by affliction, but how can she be here in this sordid place? Why? Why is she here? No, it cannot be. This is a crime. I cannot agree with this. Again, this is when he sees this person that he knew from past lives. He recognizes her, but he doesn't recognize her. Right, in this, he didn't know the persona in that specific life, but he felt the connection right away, and he saw her in a bar dancing at night, uh, apparently already sick and in trouble. And he thought, no, this cannot be it. It's a sister of mine. How can I see her in this way and not do anything? It's a very beautiful message. Suddenly, one of the mediums present started to write quickly. This is later, and in the story, it's not right after this first excerpt, but suddenly, one of the mediums present started to write quickly, and Don Ramiro saw that it was Nina who, by his side, gave him her thoughts as a spirit, so the human tool would transmit it to him. She was supported by an instructing entity and wrote with ease. Again, this is a reference, also a good teaching that she as a spirit was not back then still able to bring messages herself, so she had the help of a spiritual guide who made the psychography possible. This picture of a young woman, and this is from chapter 3. After this Cossack character dies, and he moving forward in the spiritual life, he meets again uh, this lover, this person that he loved a lot during his life, and then they have this exchange, right? It will be back later. I will be back later, Captain Novak, and I still need to tell you certain things regarding the laws of God, about which I already had the opportunity to meditate. So it's a spirit that it's bringing a message that there is so much more to learn about love, about cause and effect and reincarnation, that we need to proceed with caution, with patience, to have the time to meditate and learn from our experiences, because really that's the path of every spirit. That's the path of evolution. And this with this excerpt here, with this phrase, I thank you all for the attention, and I invite you to keep if you haven't yet, to read the book, and this way we can together learn more about love, about cause and effect, and reincarnation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Aluizio, for the reflections you provided. We are now open for comments and questions from the audience. So, first question is from the U.S. Spiritist Federation. How can we help separate any romantic ideas that someone might have when contemplating suicide?
Mhm. Well, I don't think I'm in a position of giving a giving instructions of how to cope or not to cope with difficulties of that sort. And I strongly recommend anyone who is going through this, or has a young person in their lives, a child maybe, a son, a daughter, or a friend that is going through this difficulty, this contemplation of suicide. And if that's the case, I strongly recommend looking for medical assistance, right? Psychology helps, psychiatry helps. I mean, we as society, we have developed great tools to cope with this, right? And I strongly recommend looking for those tools. That said, I also think that spiritism and religion, spirituality in general, also helps, right? In the sense that those are also social tools that we as humanity developed throughout the ages. And if we have uh, deep study, deep uh, compromise or if we really look for learning and developing our spiritual side, we understand that, at least that's my conclusion, right? That ending life, it's never a show of love, right? Uh, Maybe our culture is a little bit saturated from this. I don't think that nowadays is as so much so as it was maybe in Leo Tolstoy's time. Romanticism back then was much more dramatic, I would say, but nowadays we still have some references. But my perception is this: in society we have many good and bad influences, and I don't think that it is a good way to portray suicide in love as a show of love again. And maybe having conversations with someone who may be talking about it, uh, or has just had a broken heart. We all know how hard it is to have a broken heart, right? Maybe we feel so distressed, and we feel it's the end of the world, right? It's hard, but life goes on. I think if I can say something about this, is life goes on. Life is beautiful, and I don't think anyone is really uh, able to love just once, right? We as spiritual beings, we are capable of extreme love, of extreme capacities of connecting, of respecting, of learning, especially ourselves. So I guess this separating this romantic idea of contemplating suicide is contemplating other ideas of how to love and how to live. I think that's the best way to avoid it. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Aluizio. Our next question comes from the TVCEI International Spiritist Council. Is there any explanation why Yvonne Pereira receives so many suicide stories?
Thank you very much, Say, for this great question. Uh, I do not want to get into the specifics here because she doesn't get into the specifics in this book specifically. But for those who are more familiar with Memoirs of a Suicide and with her collective work as a medium itself, you will know that Dona Yvonne herself committed suicide in past lives, right? The first reference that we have about this, it's also in one of her books. It's a three. Those are three different books, and in the latest reincarnation that she talks about in this book, she commits suicide by throwing herself in the ocean, right? And later, right after she reincarnates as Nina, that's the last chapter, short story that we read or talked about here today. And the explanation maybe is that as an inflection or a disease of the lungs, she develops tuberculosis in her life as Nina because of this, as a kind of a cause and effect of her drowning by her own will, right? Uh, and later, I mean, she, as Nina, she does not commit suicide, but she was trying to get better from a recent suicide. And then later, in another story, we don't get to read about it here. She commits it again, right? In a life as a Portuguese young lady. So why Yvonne Pereira receives so many suicide stories? Because she's extremely connected to suicide. She committed it at least twice that we know about, and because of that, she has, like we talked in the beginning. Leo Tolstoy, by not committing, but simply by writing about it, was already connected to this wavelength, right? Don Ivone was even more because she had first-hand experience in the act itself and the consequences of it, and all the challenges that are related to it. So, in short, she received so many stories because she committed herself the suicide. Yeah, unfortunately.
Okay.
Not as Dona Ivone, by the way, as just to be clear, before her life as Dona Ivone.
Hmm. Thank you for the clarification, Aluizio. So the next question comes from the United States Spiritist Federation. Is there any cause and effect if we express eternal love for someone in our earthly life?
Is there any cause and effect if I express eternal love of someone? Uh, I'm not sure if I understand the question entirely, but my understanding of it is that if we commit ourselves to someone and we uh, put in words this compromise of love, what are the consequences of us for us in this I do not want to say contract, but in this connection that we make, right? We are in a relationship and we say I love you, like, uh, not only saying, but uh, if we actually make the connection, what are the consequences of it? I guess it's the consequences of any obligation that we assume when we uh, are in a relationship for love, and we commit, right? We also have all the responsibilities of love, right? Responsibilities of respecting, of assisting when this person is in difficulty, and also to have fun, to have good times, and to maybe have a family together. So I guess the cause and effect is like any other obligation that we take on, that we assume in life. If we desert it, right, maybe we have to go back in, or to take back or take again the responsibility in a future life and develop it, to finish it, right? uh, I do not think that this eternal love has to be a husband-wife, husband-husband, wife-wife relationship in that way. In that not necessarily, it doesn't have to be that way, but in any human level, if we show to someone that they can rely on us and we betray that trust, we definitely harvest the consequences of betrayed trust later, right? In all levels in life.
Thank you for that. So, next question, again from the U.S. Spiritist Federation. How can true love between two spirit carries on in the afterlife?
Okay, that's a very also not easy to answer question because when we say true love, at least my perception, my understanding is that we're not only talking about romantic love, right? When we talk about true love, we talk about love for our parents, love for brothers, sisters, friends. I think all of that is true love. But specifically for romantic purposes, uh, we know that the type of connections that we make in our lives, they are molded, or they are conformed by social norms, right? And it doesn't mean that because you were married to someone in one life that you necessarily be married to this person in any other life, right? uh, what is important, it's not the title or the social aspects, the financial aspects of this connection, but the spiritual and the emotional aspects. If if you have true love for another spirit, that's a bound, a connection, a link of light, of good that you will have forever, right? It's you always have this friend that will be able to assist you and you assisting back. So if we look at the spectrum of reincarnation, we go through so many different relationships, right? It's I'm not saying that you should go through many different relationships in one life. I'm saying that in different reincarnations, we connect to so many people in so many different levels. I guess one of the main points of reincarnation is that we are able to expand this network of love that we have with others and with nature and with animals. And if it's true love, if a connection is based on true love, it lasts forever. Thank you.
Good thoughts, Aluizio. So, from TVCEI International Spiritist Council,
Mhm.
can we develop or transform our earthly love into spiritual love to help us in reincarnation?
Okay, I thank you, say again for this great question. I would like just to preliminarily say that I don't see that earthly love and spiritual love are necessarily disconnected, right? I'm just saying that earthly love has some aspects that spiritual love does not necessarily have, right? Uh, doesn't matter how high level a spirit is in life. Maybe we need to do earthly connections. If we are reincarnated, we need to do uh, connections that are proper to life as life in the flesh. That's my point. Not necessarily there has to be a physical connection, but I guess the point is to get the earthly love and the spiritual love, get them rid of the aspects of our spiritual nature that are less happy, because both earthly love and spiritual love can be sublime, right? It's just that our feelings of selfishness, our ignorance, our intolerance, our uh, our hatred, all of those dark aspects of emotion and of spirituality, they can affect both earthly love and spiritual love. So the spiral of sublimation that Don Yvonne tries to describe here in story is that we move those two things together, right? Trying to reach higher levels of those aspects of love, earthly love and spiritual love. And reincarnation is the tool because it is only through experience, to be honest, that we are able to clean those aspects of love.
Mm. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. We have a message from Maria Oliveira. Thank you, Aluizio. Enlightening lecture. All the best.
Thank you, Maria. Always very kind. Thank you, my dear.
So thanks very much, Aluizio, for this presentation and the enlightenment in this very important area. And thanks to everyone who watched today's live talk and those who have been following our weekly Spiritist Talk series. Be certain not to miss our next live this next Saturday, December 10th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, when we will have members of the Spiritist Federations talking about self-assessment and resolutions. Aluizio, before we close the live, would you please say a prayer?
It will be a pleasure, Bradley. Thank you very much. And thank you, United States Spiritist Federation, for the opportunity. I would like to invite you all to elevate your thoughts, your hearts, to our God Almighty, the Supreme Intelligence, who provides us this ocean of opportunities, of reincarnations, so we can learn more about love, about the consequences of our choices, in a way that we can actually mature as human beings, as spirits. And I would like also to thank our Master, our beloved teacher, Jesus Christ, for showing us that higher levels of spirituality are not disconnected from earthly life. For when he came and lived with us, he took flesh, he took suffering, he took pain, and he showed us how to sublimate all the dark side of humanity, all the dark side of our hearts, into light, into respect. And finally, I would like to thank Don Yvonne and the spirits, Leo Tolstoy and Charles, for this book, which for me is a personal beacon of understanding Spiritism, and applying it to daily life. With that, I ask you all to be blessed and protected and guided. May you have a great Saturday. May you have a great weekend. Thank you. So be it.
Thank you,